So now we're on Daf Chaf Hamid Beis, and we're learning a Mishnah in D'mai, in the 6th parak of D'mai. There are two brothers. One is a chaver, and the other is an amoritz. And again, a chaver means that he accepted upon himself all the strict laws and a commitment to observe them. And he certainly makpid to eat bitara, even chulin bitara. The other brother is an amoritz. The yarshu es aviyim amoritz. And they inherited the estate of their father, and there's ochlin umashkin in the estate. So the chaver is very careful. He doesn't want the ochlin umashkin to get mixed up, meaning part of it will be designated for his brother, the Amoritz, and part of it for him, because if part of these Ochlin Umashkin fall into the hands of his brother, he's not going to be able to eat them bitara because he only eats chulin bitara and these are tmeim. So what does the Mishnah advocate? Yachal lomar lo, he could say to his brother, who's the Amoritz, there's a designated area which has wheat. And I know that these kernels of wheat have already been mukhshar l'kabel tumah. And if you're not makbid on tumah, so it's already tmeim.
Right.
Vani, but I'm going to take chitin shemakom ploni in a different area, and I know that there was no hechshel l'kabel tumah. He can also say to his brother, Tol atah yayin shemakom ploni, because I know that those were not done bitara. Vani, and I will take yayin shemakom ploni, where I know that it was prepared bitara and there was shmira bitara. Fine, all that is simple. Avo lo yomer lo tol atah lach. Vani yavesh tol atah chitim vani atol sa'orim. The brother who's a chaver should not say to his brother, the Amoritz, you take lach, you take liquids, mashkim, because mashkim have a chazaka of tumah, vani, and I'll take yavish. Yavish means they weren't hushal kabel tumah, they didn't come in contact with any of the 7 mashkim. And furthermore, he should not say to him, you take chitin that we know were huchshel kabel tumah, and I will take siorim, because I know that the siorim were not huchshel kabel tumah. Now, why are these last 2 cases excluded? He says, me'achar shalakol echad me'am yesh chelik b'kol echad me'aminim. So he's not dividing it up based on location, but rather based on the min. Like, for example, chitin versus siorin. Kishemevater achaver al Yerushasa b'min mesuyam nimtza shenosein lochvus chelko b'yoso min. He's giving up the chaver on his rights to that specific min. Let's say to Sa'orin, for example. Uperos shechezkosam tmeim also l'seisam li'amaretz. Now we may have Sa'orim that have a chezkas tumah because they're wet, and he's not allowed to give them to an amaretz. He's being machshil the amaretz and an isur, and therefore he violates l'fnei ivur lo sitei nichshal. In the reisha, the chaver is not being mevater on his chelik in a min. He's just being mevater on a makom mesuyam, on a place, on a location. And then we'll say huvar adovel mafreya, that each one was makabel his yerusha from that min. and he never gave one to the other. So he's not giving Tmeim over to the Amoritz. It's funny how long we learned in a Brisa regarding that Mishnah in Tmai. Also, Chaver Sorev Halach Umeniach Es HaYovich. That if the Chaver inherits from his father, Lach, now, he adds here another note here that the father himself is an Amoritz. I don't know if we mentioned that.
No.
So let's say, for example, he inherits Shemen Shel Truma, and he's a Kohen. So he can use that Shemen L'mitzvaso, which means Lahad B'Kneros, but he's not allowed to eat the Shemen. He can't use it as a salad dressing because he has to be afraid maybe Nitma. However, with regard to Yovech, where there was no Hechshel Kabel Tumah, Meniachas Yovech, he's allowed to eat it. So Rav Sheshes points out, was it Rav Sheshes? Yeah, Omalu Rav Sheshes, right? Rav Sheshes points out that we could prove from this that a Kohen who received Truma from an Amoritz, and the Amoritz is not believed, he's not trustworthy on Tara, he's not allowed to leave it in his possession and wait till the Shas Gitos Vabad. If he was allowed to do that, Amai, why does he have to burn the Truma that he inherited? Okay, the Amoritz is not believed to testify that it's tar, but why don't we just wait till it's to the next year's got, and then he can eat it b'cheskes of tara. So the Gemara rejects this. It's possible that something that has a zman kavua for the nemonis of the Amoritz, like yain v'shemen, ein chinami, you're allowed to leave it to a later time period. But the Bryce is talking about a davar she'ein lo gas. It doesn't have a zman kavua for preparing. Like, for example, they used to take dates, tamarim, and make date beer out of it, sheikhar tamarim. And it didn't have a gat, meaning a zman kavua, for the preparation of the sheikhar tamarim. And regarding the tara of truma, we didn't believe the Amoritz at any period of time in such a case, because there's no period of time which is zman kavua. So that's why the Brisa says that you're not allowed to set up this arrangement, because we assume that this is shelo b'shas hagat, because ein lo gat kavua, and the Amoritz therefore is not believed. We can't trust him at any time period at all. So the Gemara asks, "V'anichen l'regel." There was never a gzera of safek tuma in the case of an Amoritz as far as regel is concerned. Again, we didn't get to that Gemara yet, but therefore he could sell it. In any event, we see clearly that if a person receives something from an Amoritz at a time period when the chazaka is that it's tameh, he's not allowed to leave it for a time period later on and be machzikit b'tara. And the Gemara rejects this and says, "B'davar she'eino mishtamer lo regel." The Bryce is talking about something that won't be able to retain its freshness, its edibility till the regel. And therefore, we're afraid that he might eat it prematurely. Lo huta lashoso etzlo, but b'davar mishtamer eino chinami, they were matir. Let's see if we can continue just a little bit further. The Mishnah says, "Im Omar Efrashti l'socha revius kodesh nemon." All right, this has to do with the Beis HaPras, where you had a graveside that was in a field, and then they did a total charisha of the field. And the Chacham said that anybody goes into that field becomes tummy. We're afraid that maybe how do you say charisha in English? I forget.
Plow, like maybe plow.
Plow. Yeah, maybe the plow would have carried and transported the bones of the dead,
right,
and spread them throughout the field.
Right.
And therefore, by walking in the field, he is what's called Masechet al mes. And again, that only applies if the etzem, if the bone of the corpse is kisaora, it has at least the size of a barley. And also there might be a tumor of mago masa. Okay, fine. So now we have a Mishnah. Is there a way of checking a Beis HaPras and guaranteeing that you're not stepping over a bone? It's not a Hassam. At the end of Masechet Olo says, Modim Beichame Beisilche Bodkim Liosei Pesach, for the benefit of those who want to be makriv of the Korban Pesach B'Tara, and they have to pass through a Beis HaPras on the way, they can rely on the following bedika. V'ein bodkin liochle truma. So this is a special kula for the Osei Pesach. My bodkim, how do they check it out? As he's leaning down on the floor, he blows on the offer of the Beis HaPras, and he clears a pathway that he can walk on top of the area that he blew on. And he'll be able to see whether there's an etzem kisaora. And if there is, he'll go far away from it. He has a different kind of bedika, and that is Beis HaPras shenidash tar. Meaning he has to check out and see if people have already walked over there. And if people walked there, then it's nidash. Nidash means it's crushed through the feet and the weight of a human being that passed there. And therefore you could assume for sure that any bones were broken up and there's nothing there, not even one bone left that has the shear of etzem kisaora. So Gemara's medayek li osei Pesach. We can rely on the bedika of a Beis HaPras for the benefit of osei Pesach. Lo hamidu divreiam b'makom kares. Since if they don't bring the Korban Pesach, they will violate kares. Therefore, they didn't insist on their gzera of tumas Beis HaPras in a case of kares, namely for the Korban Pesach. However, in contrast, when it's a mitzvah of eating truma, then the Rabbanu will insist on their gzera of tumas Beis HaPras. They will not rely on a bedika. B'makom misa, meaning that if he would eat the truma b'tuma, then he's chayav misa b'dei shamayim. So they'll waive and overlook the gzera of tumas Beis HaPras and rely on a bedika in order to avoid kares. But in the case of ochlei truma, where there's a possibility that there's tumah in the Beis HaPras, and if he would eat the truma b'tumah, he would be chayav misa b'dei shamayim. We will not rely on a bedika. Since we rely on the bedika for Korban Pesach, can therefore we rely on that bedika to allow him to eat the truma? Again, l'chatchila, we don't rely on this bedika for truma, but once we relied on it for what? For the Korban Pesach, and therefore we established a chazak of tara. Once we establish chazak of tara, that should have an impact even as far as truma. Or do we say no? That maybe the Chachamim were not mated to be somech on the bedika, as far as Achilas Truma is concerned. And the Gemara clarifies this, Ula Omar Badak Lepischa Mutolecha B'Trumaso. Rabba Bar Ula Omar Badak Lepischa also Lecha B'Trumaso. Amalei. So Ula turns to Rabba Bar Chana, or Hausaba, or some elderly person, scholarly person. Lo tiflog alei di Ula. You should not disagree with Ula, the kula of Ula, that mutolechol b'trumasa, disnan kavosin. How can you reject Ula when there is a Mishnah that supports him? Because in the ratio of our Mishnah, an Amaretz is believed on Taras HaKodesh, but not on Taras Truma. And yet, V'im Omar Hifrashti L'Solcha, Revius Kodesh, Nemon. If I added to the Truma in the Chavis a Revius Lug of Kodesh, he's believed even as far as the Truma is concerned. So really his fundamental credibility is only as far as Kodesh. But once we believe him as far as Kodesh, Memela, we believe him as far as Truma is concerned. Alma, we see clearly that Mibehemnin HaKodesh, Memela, is Mehema Nami Truma. Once we believe him for Taras HaKodesh, he's believed also for Taras HaTruma. Is Hachinami, we should apply the same yardstick with regard to B'dikas Beis HaPras, Midemehemnen HaPesach, once we believe him and trust him to allow someone to bring his Korban Pesach and pass through the Beis HaPras with that B'dika, the B'dika establishes a Cheskes Tara, and therefore Mehemnen Nami Truma is going to be meaningful even as far as Truma is concerned. And that seems to be clearly the final conclusion of this Gemara.
The end of Chagigah is hard.
Tana, we learned in a brisa, Ein Amei Oretz Nemonim Lo Al Taras HaKankanim V'Lo Al HaTruma, Al Taras HaTruma. The Gemara clarifies this. Kankanim Demai. What kind of kankanim are we talking about? What's inside of these kankanim? I kankanim b'kodesh is migu dehem and kodesh mehem nami kankanim. Since they believed on kodesh to establish the Torah, then why shouldn't they believe on the Torah's kankanim? El b'kankanim de truma is pshita hashta truma lo mehem na kankanim mehemnin. If on truma itself that's inside the kankanim they're not believed, meaning Shalom B'Shas Kitos, is it possible that on the Kankanim themselves they would be believed? Why did the Bryce have to tell me this din? That Ein Emonim Lo Al Kankanim Lo Al Truma. El the Gemara answers, B'Rei Konim de Kodesh. We're talking about Kankanim that had Kodesh, and then they poured out the Kodesh into other Kankanim. Ubeshar Yemos Hashon. So even though they believed these Ameorits on Kodesh that was inside of them, the Gam Omer Shemamchich L'Shomram B'Tara, they claim that they continued to preserve and protect it in Tara. Kidei Litem B'Hem Kodesh B'Yasid, so the Kankanim will still remain in the state of Tara for the future. They're not believed. Ubimaleim de Truma. And the Bryce is also talking about a case of Kankanim Maleim de Truma. Ubishas Hagitos. That even though they believed at that period of time of Chas Hagitos on Taras HaTruma, they're not believed on Taras HaKankanim. And a Kohen who receives Truma from an Amoritz, Mara Osel Toch Kelev Shalom. He should be very careful to pour the Truma into his own Kelim, the Kelim of the Kohen, and not the Kelim of the Amoritz. Why? Because on Truma, we believe them because we don't want to be mafsid the Kohanim, rov Trumos, Sheba Eretz Yisrael, Shema Frichim Amayaretz. They're not believed on the Kankanim because there's not going to be such a hefsed for the Kohen. Tnan, we learned in our Mishnah, Kada Yain v'Kada Shemen Hamadu Ma'os Amioretz are believed on Taros, the Shas Gitos and Badim, and it says Kada Yain are Tahoros. Is my love Medumos the Truma? In other words, this Tevel, and they weren't mafresh the Truma from the Tevel, so there's a Tarovas now of Chulin and Truma. And therefore, it seems clear that Bisman Chamoretz Memon al Taras HaTruma, he's also believed on the Kadin, in which the Truma is placed. And that's against the Brisa. And the Gemara answers, Amri Debei Rabbi Chia. What Kadin, when we talk about Medumos the Kodesh, it means it has Tevel, and it's mixed Tevel Me'ura Bo Kodesh, so the Kodesh mixed into the Tevel. And once he's believed on Taras HaKodesh, he's believed also on the Kadin. So Gemara asks, Umika Dimur LeKodesh, is it shaykh to talk about Tevel Me'ura BeKodesh? Hari Masha Netshavat Tevel Me'ura V'mat Truma, Hu Mishum Sheish Chiv Lahafresh Mitochas HaTruma, L'chein Kolod Shalo Efrashnu. The truma is mixed in until he was mafresh. He doesn't have any chiv to be mafresh kodem for them. Amri to be Rabbi Eloi b'mitayres tivlo k'dei litol mimenu nitzachim. He was guarding his tevel b'tara because he intended to take off nitzachim. So there's a tarovis of Kodesh, Truma, and Chulin. And once he's believed on the Taras HaKodesh, he's also believed on Taras HaTruma v'Akadin. And we could add the following. As Rashi mentions, the Gnayahu l'Kodesh, HaKorv al HaMizbech, HaKelim b'hem hunach yichosh b'tmeim. And finally, the Mishnah says, Kodem l'gitos shivim yom. The Amoritz is already believed on Taras HaKadim, Hamidumoyim, 70 days earlier, before the Gitos. We see from this, Dina hu dilove arisa lemitrach aglufe. Hadinu al ha'oris, muta litroach b'achonis chavios shivim yomim mikami matzrata. Before the time of Schitas HaNovim, for the purpose of Yayin, that he's going to put inside. Masha neman amoris mizman zeh lo meshahechim b'shames hachavis b'tara litzarach hagitos is mishum shebe'emes minhag ha'olam lahachines hachavios mizman zeh v'imkein mutal ha'oris lasos zos. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Chaf Hey Amid Beis. And Mitzvah, we'll pick that up tomorrow.